Hey, this is episode 6 of Hoopfolio podcast. This episode I talked to former Davidson player and Irish international Mike Bree, the first Irish player to play Division 1 college basketball in America. Mike's also had a pro career in Europe and is now the head coach of an elite basketball academy in Sweden. Mike, thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Great. Okay, so I kind of have a list of things we want to talk about as usual. So maybe we'll start with your school. So you're originally from Sligo, just to kind of give you some background there. Whereabouts in Sligo? Because I couldn't find that online.
I'm from the town centre.
Oh, you're from the town centre. Okay.
I grew up in Cranmore, and then I moved to Marboy, which is another area, the other part of the town. When I was about 6, and I grew up the rest of my childhood there. So very close to Merville or St. Mary's if you're a GAA person, St. Mary's, and if you're a soccer person, Merville, right next to the Rovers football ground.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah, I know Sligo Rovers because they played Longford a fair few times. That was maybe one thing that we weren't terrible at was soccer for some reason, even though there wasn't a local talent in our club. But okay, that's quite interesting actually. And did you spend summers in Sligo? Did you kind of?
One of the lucky things about where we moved to was that we had a community centre right across the street. So we had a football field, we had a Gaelic park, we had a tennis courts, basketball court, outdoor basketball courts. So, I mean, in terms of the summers, if the weather was good, generally it wasn't great, but it was okay. It was good enough to be outside. We were outside, and there was multi-sport camps. There was a lot of different things going on that we kind of took part on during the summer.
Okay, cool. And then I was just going to say, because I'm pretty sure when I was younger, I used to go to Enniscrone. Enniscrone was like Yeah. So there was a lot of beaches there. Mullaghmore is there as well.
Ross's Point, Trent Hill. Yeah,
Trent Hill. Yeah. Okay. So you wouldn't venture too far in terms of during the summer.
No, not very far at all. Stay close to home.
Okay. And then when you started off playing basketball, was the club called Sligo All Stars at that point? Or was it actually existing when you were growing up?
It was. I mean, I grew up in basketball in Sligo. It was going on very well. It was a kind of a hub for basketball in the country. Sligo was one of the hubs, with a lot of former international players kind of who lived in the area, who established families, who were working within the club, kind of building up the club structure from the youth level. I think that I benefited greatly from the experience. That was, John McGowan, who was a local coach, Tom Hickey, a lot of guys who were around, who kind of gave us an opportunity to kind of learn from their experiences. And I put a lot down to where I got to based on the foundation that was given to me at a very young age.
So some of those guys, you'd look up to some of those guys when you were playing underage?
I never saw them play. I got to experience them as coaches, but I knew they had a history of playing. So I watched my brothers play a little bit older, and obviously Sligo was in and out of the top league, the first league, and then there was teams close by were Ballina. They had a very better version of teams in Ballina. So we had the experience. But I grew up in the time when the foreign player, the Americans that we brought in were excellent. There was a high level of American coming into the country, and they provided entertainment, athleticism. Played the game a little bit differently. They made it entertaining, and as you're young and you're watching it, you're like, oh wow, this is pretty good, this is pretty nice. So I got the benefit of that.
Yeah, I don't really have a great understanding of the history of basketball in Ireland. And this is something that maybe in the podcast I'm going to try and explore and try and get some people who are historians of the game and try and get them to. I know there's a group at the moment that Scotland have and Ireland have, where they're kind of reeling in the ears type group where they're putting up photographs like that. So I've just joined the Irish one. So I might get somebody to try and do an executive summary of the history of Irish basketball. I know there's some documentaries and stuff, but it's great to hear just firsthand accounts. Do you have any kind of sense of why we had better Americans coming in then? Was it kind of seemed like a golden era?
there wasn't an avenue for them to go to Europe. It wasn't a common thing. Ireland was a natural stepping stone, English-speaking country. One step over the pond. It was, and that's what it started off. I think we were the first country, or one of the first countries, to get in a high level of American, and then the rest of Europe caught on, and they kind of skipped over Ireland later on. It was a hop rather than a stay. And the game benefited, for sure. The game benefited from the influx of higher level Americans, and some of them stayed in Ireland and established roots in Ireland, and kept the culture going and added to the culture of basketball for a lot of kids.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never actually understood, because you would hear about, and also in places like Scotland too, just looking at the reeling in the years, they got some really strong Americans in there too, and even in the English league. And they talk about that as almost the golden era, because I guess, as you say, if they're getting in these really good standard players, it increases the level in the country, because the domestic players learn from these guys and step up, obviously, as well.
By themselves, to raise the level. So the game is more entertaining. It's you can do more. You see more of the game that maybe wasn't capable without them. So it's
interesting. So you're well. I don't know if you missed that era or you were just after it. So you could say you're a child of the golden era of basketball in Ireland.
Yeah, I would be.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. That's an interesting point. Okay, so after then, your time in Sligo All Stars, I found this interesting article. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's in the Irish Times, and I think it was written around the time that you ended up going to college in America. I don't know if you've ever read it, but I was going to attempt to read it out to you, because the way it's written is absolutely brilliant. I think it was just a kind of it's maybe of its time, but let me try and share the screen, and I think I have it open here. Yeah, I think this is it here. Never done this before, but I'm going to try it. There's just a couple of paragraphs. It's actually the screen here. Can you see that?
I can.
Okay. I've got work stuff coming up, so I'm going to have to edit that bit out. So this is shooting from the very top. I don't know who wrote this, but it was written back in 1997.
17, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So just even the wording. So it says Saturday night basketball in Sligo in a chilly gym on the outskirts of the town. A tight, inflamed crowd are lost in the midst of another torrid league encounter. The All Stars are struggling against a tidy and slick side from Mid-Sutton Baldoyle, so MBS. So Sutton, my understanding of Sutton is it's basically what became Jerome Westbrooks was playing for them. So that would have been the Killester, basically.
I'm not sure myself. I don't know what they became, but yeah.
Okay. So just some of the language that he was using here I thought was brilliant. So he said, who have lulled their young opponents into a slow game before stinging them with a series of easy baskets to take the lead late in the game, in the match, led by an elegant motor-mouthed Jerome Westbrooks. I mean, was Jerome a talker? Do you remember that of him?
I don't remember too much about him. I think I met the guy once or twice, but there were stories about him, the way he talked, the way he carried himself. You know, he had confidence, and he portrayed it.
Right. Okay. It's just an interesting way that the use of language. So wonderfully composed in a glare of the game, which exploded in a haze of questionable calls, stray elbows, and wild-eyed fans. So just the wild-eyed fans part. I mean, I'm not sure what kind of fans you have in Sligo, but I'm sure they're not wild-eyed, are they?
You know, you'd be surprised. They were passionate. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. As you say, it was probably the golden era. There's probably a lot of people coming out to watch the game.
It was a good environment.
Okay. Right. Interesting.
Supported the game. It's good to see.
So it says, roughly 3 minutes left to go, and you were down a point. I don't know if you remember this. They rushed up on defense, scavenging desperately to retrieve momentum as MBS crossed midcourt. Sligo's Pascal Bree, a hard-nosed, red-haired hustler. So I assume this is your brother.
It is my brother, yes.
I was reading this earlier on. I was getting a great kick out of it. Gets a hand to the ball and then whips a pass to the brother Michael, who's fouled. His brother Michael, who slashes to the hoop. So do you remember this play in particular?
I do not. I don't remember the article either. So it's
right.
it's nice.
It's interesting to watch, yeah. I thought you would maybe know it, but maybe you wouldn't. You know.
No, I don't know this at all. No.
This is a great description. I love the description. So Michael Bree stands on the free throw line, a loose, athletic 17-year-old, deceptively tall. So I've heard of deceptively quick or deceptively athletic, deceptively tall.
It must have been the way I carried myself.
Right? I don't know. Maybe you were hunching over all the time and you just
had proper posture.
Deceptively tall. So what are you? You're six.
I'm not. I was over 6 foot. I'm 180, 185, 186 in centimeters.
Well, you're deceptively tall, Michael. So you can say that about you. So yeah, he scores the first shot and then breathes a silent oath as his second effort rims out. So I thought that was very good. And he said he had cause to be annoyed, a born gym rat. So I don't know if anyone could be a born gym rat, but apparently, I'm sure you were a gym rat, but I don't know if you were born a gym rat.
Yeah, not born, but
I thought it was brilliant. So, and then they kind of go on to talk about your move to college, which we'll chat about in a sec. But I just thought that article was brilliant.
I've never seen it.
Just the use, just the language they use. I don't know if that kind of journalism happens much anymore, but just it was so colorful the way he described everything. Yeah. Okay. I'll stop sharing now and we go back out. So that leads in nicely. So I mean, roughly about that time, I assume that was roughly at the end of you're at the end of school.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, go on.
1997, yeah, the end of school, end of summer college.
End of school. And at that point, you, based on just that article actually mentioned this a little bit, was that when you kind of, I think you were on the national team and it was under 19? Is that right?
Junior basketball, I guess under 18 or 19, whatever junior basketball was at the time. So we were there. We had it was the old competition system for European Championships. So right now they have A, B divisions. There was no A and B divisions. Everyone muddled together.
Oh, okay.
And we had a very strong generation. We had size, we had guards, we had shooting, we had playmakers, we had defenders. We were good. The team was good.
Okay.
If you're talking about maybe we were the golden generation of the kids, all of us grew up in the same era of Irish basketball. Maybe
interesting.
Factors of all the teaching and the early influx of top quality talent. So we qualified out of our group stage. We played with some quality teams. We ended up getting to the semi-final round of the European Championships, which was for Irish basketball. We ended up playing like Russia. We played Belgium, played Italy. We played some of the best countries who had, as it turned out, some great NBA talent, future NBA talent that was there. And that was a great experience. And it was done over the summer, over 2 rounds, and thoroughly enjoyable. And then, we got myself and Gary Dredge were invited to the first ever Nike European camp, which was in Paris at the time. It's like the world versus the USA team. So it's the world team. It was called European Camp, Nike European Camp now. So, but we had kids from Asia and all over the world who were coming in. Yao Ming was there. So
no way, Yao Ming was there. Really, that's crazy.
And then there was supposed to be a team picked from that. And before the tournament, I was told that I was pre-selected to be on the team to play the USA. And didn't have a great camp. I didn't have a great experience with the camp. I didn't perform the way I wanted to perform, but nevertheless, I had a number of offers coming in from colleges after the camp, and even a little bit before it. So it was I got exposure. I got the right type of exposure with the right people, and I got the opportunity from it.
Wow, that's interesting that it was the not split up into A and B, so you were playing against the top tier in the world at the time.
It was great. Or in Europe.
In Europe, yeah.
And we played Spain. That was Spain's golden generation with Pau Gasol and Jan Carlos Navarro. So it's all that golden generation of Spanish players, who won, world championships, Olympics or whatever. They won so many trophies. That was the generation that we played, and they ended up winning the whole thing in that year as well. So
who did you play in the semi-final of that?
Italy for sure. Italy, Russia, Belgium, and there was one more. I forget. It was such a long time ago. But Karolenko was on the Russian team. I mean, Italy had a number of really good players too. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was a fun experience.
Cool. I didn't know that actually. I didn't know you got to the semi-final, which is an incredible achievement. I've never seen that in the archives, if there are any archives.
We were the first team to do it, and I think in the
amazing.
old system, I think we were the only team to do it. I think the generation after us, Conor Gracie's generation, I think they did pretty well too. I don't know how far they got, but I think they did pretty well as well. So maybe they also did it. I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, it's even more interesting what you said about the golden generation and how that may have fostered stuff, that kind of, that talent, and that maybe you guys would just been in that era where there was so much hype coming through about the game, and just the love of the game was just at its height.
Yeah, we were growing up with Michael Jordan at his peak. We had the end of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, their careers. You had basketball was just booming. NBA was growing. I mean, it was global, becoming a global sport, global entertainment. And I remember running down to the store on a Friday to pick up any sort of like a magazine that was coming in that we could just read about the NBA the previous month, any sort of slam magazine, whatever was out, we got it. We didn't have access to the TV. We didn't have access to, watching games regularly. It wasn't on. Maybe Channel 4 would show a game on a Sunday night, or maybe they showed the All-Star game, and we go hang out with one of the friends, and they had it. We go watch it at their house. Come home at 2:30 in the morning. This was part and parcel of what you did, because you wanted to absorb as much as you could.
Yeah,
and that was our world, and then the rest of it was in your imagination. It was you dreaming. So it was good.
That's really cool. Okay, so then after that, then so it was it Bob McKillop so he was the coach at Davidson, and was he actually, so there was coaches at the tournament? And
no, there was no, it wasn't at the tournament. It was agents. There was agents at the tournament who were watching, who were connected to college coaches. I remember I met 2 or 3 agents at the time at the tournament. One in particular was the one who put me in Bob McKillop's radar. And then McKillop came over and visited me. He was one of, I think, 2 or 3 different coaches who flew over to, meet me, meet my family, kind of pitched the idea of coming to their school. I think what impressed me with McKillop was, well, he was very professional, but it was more so what he was saying to me. A lot of people deal in hype, and they tell you what you want to hear, and to this day, people tell you what you want to hear when they're trying to recruit you. It's wine and dine you, but for me, he just said he'd give me an opportunity. He didn't say I was going to be this or I was going to be that, or he promised me. He said all he did was promise me an opportunity to perform, and it's up to me to take it. And for me, that was enough to be like, all right, this guy's been as honest as maybe he can be, and I was like, yeah, sounds good.
So you're getting like a realistic view of where you're going to be on the team versus like you're going to be playing loads of minutes. He was realistic about, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of the other end now. I'm a coach here for elite level kids who are being recruited by Division I schools now, and I get this story. And then I try to remind them that I went through the college process. That you don't have to go through this with me. You just gotta tell me how do you truly see the kid. Tell them the truth about what they're going into. You don't need to, these kids will believe the hyperbole if left to their own devices, because why wouldn't they? They're young, they're impressionable, but they don't have to be that way. But so we try to educate them and make them aware of the situation, the true situation, that once you sign, all that hyperbole is gone. now you're theirs, and now you have to adapt to them. They're not adapt to you, and it can be a rude awakening for a lot of kids when they get over that.
Okay, that's interesting. So it kind of shaped your view then of how, it's good to be upfront about the expectations for the kids going into these programs, to say you're actually probably going to, sit behind this guy for the first season, or you're going to, whatever the case may be.
Or maybe it's a free-for-all, but it's a free competition. It's open competition. There's no hierarchy. Maybe whatever you want to say to the kid, but be honest about the situation versus, oh yeah, you're going to play. We have this role for you. We see you as this person, versus they don't know who you're going to be. They don't know how you're going to develop, but they're telling you that you do. They don't have a clue. Kids develop different ways. No one's in the head of the kid. The kid decides if he's going to keep training, if he's going to work hard. The kid decides how he's going to handle adversity. It's not the coach. The coach can't determine that. So they can't predict what's going to happen to each and every kid. So why even try to?
Yeah, and it's interesting you said that, because one of the head coaches from the English basketball academy that sends a lot of kids to the States said the very same thing. It's a lot of times it's actually the kids that you're surprised at how well they do. He goes, the guys I was most worried about actually sometimes did the best because they had the most resilience. But he said talent, he had less offers, or he wasn't sure talent wise or whatever. So
I think it's intangibles. I think a lot of things that kids lack that fail over there are intangibles. They may have talent, they may have height, they may have length, they may look the part, but when it becomes nothing, when it comes everything about just competition and winning games, and how do you handle things not working in your favor? How do you handle criticism? How do you handle being criticized in front of your teammates on a video screen where the coach is stopping, rewinding, calling you out, saying you're not on the tape, you're not down, look at how you're moving, you're not denying, you hurt your team. How do you handle these situations and not take them to heart? And I've seen a lot of players crumble. I've seen a lot of players break because of it, because they don't have the mental resilience to separate the business from making it personal. But and maybe things have changed, but I don't think they've changed that much.
Yeah, no, and look, I've definitely seen that in the locker room a few times. Guys coming down hard on younger players, and they it's the adversity comes, and it's do they have the resilience then to pick themselves back up and keep motoring forward. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. So one of the things that was a really amazing point was that before you, as far as I'm aware, you can correct me if I'm wrong, nobody had made it. So there was a couple of guys that had gone to the NCAA, but they hadn't actually played at the top levels as Division I NCAA. So you seem to be the first Irish player. But then I did see there was a female Irish player, and I think she might even have been from Ballina. I think I have her name here, Maggie Timoney. I don't know if you've heard of her.
I haven't.
So there might be, because I read it on an article and I was like, oh, actually, you're the first male player to play in Division I. That's I think
that could be. As far as I'm aware, that's the case. I don't know. I don't know of anyone else, but that was a nice achievement, but it was also a difficult thing to deal with because. You talked to Paul Cummins the other day, and Paul was behind me. So he came in, he got a Division I scholarship after me. Conor Grace came in my senior year. Paul was around the same time. And I remember Paul contacted me when I was in college about his situation and how difficult it was to adapt. And I think it was a freshman at the time. And he was receiving all this information that I just talked about. We couldn't find the flow. We couldn't find the rhythm in the game for himself. And I just talked about my experiences. I wrote him back in an email. I just told him about my experiences and how I handled things and how I got through certain things, similar experiences to himself. I never had that. I never had that person to be like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, the situation, what any advice you can give me. So I didn't have that. So I had to kind of figure things out by myself. I knew I wasn't coming back to Ireland. So no matter what happened, I wasn't heading back home. When I grew up, I heard so many stories of kids going over there, they're chasing a dream, and then they all came back within 1 or 2 years with, broken or shattered or just, upset about what they were sold versus what they got. But I was determined to make something out of it no matter what. So I think that's what kind of kept me going. I remember in the first 6 months, I was talking to my mother, and I was like, maybe I should come home. Like this is so tough. This is so hard. I mean, you were homesick. I had no family around me. Well, my sister was in New York, and they were far away. Like, but I didn't. I was in Davidson, North Carolina, and I was thrust into a basement dorm with a weed smoking football player who was up all night and sleeping all day like
So you're actually put in with a football player.
Yeah, it's like I came in January, not at the start of the year. So when they recruited me, I was 17 and they wanted me to come there, but they had 2 guards ahead of me, and they didn't want me to waste a year of eligibility. So they asked me for a red shirt for a year, and I was like, why not? But I didn't want to go for the whole year because I didn't want to just practice and just sit in the bench and practice. So I said I'd stay in Ireland for 6 months. I'd earn a little bit of money. I'd play with Sligo All Stars. And then after Christmas, I'd come over for 1 semester, get accustomed to the school, meet the people, and then be even more ready to go in August, all in. And even after the first 3 or 4 months, I was homesick. I was like, wow, this is tough. And that's where I wanted to be. That's where I knew I was going there. So even with that, I'm determined to be there. I was still homesick. But after I talked to my mother, I was going to do it no matter what. So a month later, I never looked back. Like that was the end of that. I never thought anything more about it, and went from there.
Yeah, it's interesting because Paul said he had a similar situation. He wanted to go straight to Lafayette, and then said that the coach asked him because there was someone in ahead of him, which must be a thing. Then obviously that they kind of they see this. We don't want you to waste the year because we still have this guy. We know he's going to play, so you're going to have to. You're better off waiting until that person's left, and then you'll get the spot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's smart. You get 4 years of playing, plus you're 1 year older. I mean, the guys who are graduating now from this school where I'm in are 19, going on 20. I mean, this is great. They're going to be 24. I can remember my senior year, how slow the game was in college, how much of an advantage it was to be 1 more year mature, more physically mature. And I was only 22. Imagine if I was 23, 24, the college game would have been much, much easier. So been so young and been slender. I mean, I was a slender kid. There wasn't much on me at all. So going to that type of environment was tough. Physically, we were very tough. And, the one trait that I think that I learned that I kept with all my career was I learned how to protect the ball, essentially. So in Ireland, I never had to learn how to protect the ball. I could move where I wanted to go. I could dribble where I wanted to dribble. In college, I had to dribble specifically to a certain spot. And then the defense knew where I was going, and they were maybe 20, 30 pounds heavier than me. And as soon as they put their hands on me, I stopped. So I had to figure out how to navigate to certain areas of the floor, use different skill sets to get there to make sure that I could make the offense work for the team. So
was hand checking still in play at that point?
Hand checking, pulling, hitting, bumping, tagging.
Okay.
I mean, we used to have a drill where we just tag people. Like you'd start at the top of the key, we'd all line up staggered wise. You'd run through, and then we just hit you. This
is somebody cutting through the key.
No pads, nothing. Just hit you. Bam! Everyone gets to hit you, and you have to.
That's completely gone from the game. It's totally different, isn't it?
I mean, built toughness. I mean, it was fun. I mean, but you did it. I watched an old game. We played UNC. I think it was a UNC we watched. I don't know. I must have tagged 3 or 4 people cutting into the. I mean, we just hit them hard. Like if they came into the paint, we hit them, and it was just been drilled doing it.
Yeah, much more physical game. It's definitely changed now. That doesn't exist, and I think if someone cuts through the key, and you can kind of get in their way, but you can't actually hit them like the way it used to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So I was just thinking a point on the coach. Obviously, there's just bringing up Steph Curry's. He's a great discussion point because he went there. But he must have an eye for talent in the sense that he found you in a country that probably wasn't really a country that people would have looked to recruit from.
Well,
and took a chance. Like
well, really. he was ahead of the curve in terms of he was a. He had a lot of relationships within Europe. He had a lot of coaches, did a lot of clinics within Europe. He foresaw. He could look ahead. He saw the advantage of actually creating networks outside of the States. He was a small school. He couldn't compete with the bigger schools of recruiting the same type of kids. So he had to find a different advantage. So he went to Europe. And he used to go over to Europe, especially Italy, and do clinics over there. So he developed a lot of different relationships with agents, with coaches who would find talent for him. And then obviously with the European Championships and the accumulation of all the talent in one spot, it's an easy way to find different players. So if you have good contacts, they can kind of filter the right players to you. And so it wasn't him. He wasn't out looking. It was people who were telling him who to look for. And,
that's interesting. So it's almost like it evolved into that because as you said, they couldn't compete with the bigger schools that were able to get the bigger names. So it's then, well, did we need to find another talent pool? And Europe is one of those places that we can.
Exactly. And it was a style of game. You wanted IQ players, you wanted smart players, you wanted people who could shoot. So he had a certain idea of how he wanted to play the game, and he needed a certain type of athlete. And then he also, because of the school and the academic system, he needed a smart kid also to get into the school because the academic requirements are very high. So he needed his pool of players got narrow and the state smaller, so he had to try and expand it somehow, and he used Europe to do that.
Wow, interesting. That's a quite interesting insight. I didn't know that actually.
And now they've expanded to Australia, New Zealand, Asia. They've expanded, so they've gone all around the world. I mean, they're
picking from everywhere now. It's kind of become global.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Sweden.
Sweden too. Yes, one of our kids went there 2 years ago.
Oh, to Davidson. Interesting. Wow, that's crazy. And he's still at the helm, Killop, isn't he? Yeah.
Philip, I think he's still motoring away, but his son is now the head associate coach, so I think he's taking more of the daily responsibilities. I know my contact was always with Bob, and now it's kind of gone towards Matt, who's the head assistant, so he's been more contacting me, doing all the work and talking to me about players and stuff like that. So
okay, so he's kind of natural succession planning. Okay, cool. So I've got a point here. You got to the tournament. Is that right? In 2002, was that the year you were there?
Yeah, but I was part of 2 NCAA tournament teams.
Okay.
My first year when I redshirted, I was part of that group who got to play Michigan and tractor trailer in
tractor trailer. Yeah.
Where was it? Some
Wow.
It was Atlanta, I think it was. It was I watched that game actually recently as well. We actually played well. It was just we went down early. It was the first time we were at the tournament, first time for everybody. A little bit of shell shock, big arena, huge fans all around us, and they got out to an early lead and they kind of maintained it all the way through. But once we got over the initial nerves, we were well able to play.
Wow.
And, but the game changed so much. When I look at college basketball now, it's boys. They're young. It's so young. When I look back at they were men.
They were men.
They were men playing the game because no one was leaving after 1-2. You had, you had Mick Bree, you had Carlos Booth. These were 4-year seniors. Like you had guys who were, who would have been gone after 1 year now are all there and they're all playing in the same team. Like
it's true because the elite talent stayed in college, right? It wasn't like they left. So you got the biggest guys, the strongest guys, the most athletic guys are staying there for 3 or 4 years.
Year. Yes.
That's a good point. Yeah, I never thought of that. You're going to have to send me on some of these games, by the way. Have you got digital copies of them, by any chance?
I think we have them. Yeah, we have them.
I'd love to see a couple of them, especially we're in lockdown now. I was watching basketball all the time, so that's really cool.
Yeah, and then in 2002, we got there again. Unfortunately for me, it was I had a freak injury in our conference final tournament. We were playing against Furman. With 10 minutes into the game, I received an inbounds pass to bring the ball to the floor. I pivoted around. I had a Brazilian defender. I forget his name. He was a long 6'3", 6'4" guy. He was a good player, but he got underneath me and he swiped up to try and knock the ball out of my hands, but he caught me right on the funny bone, right on the ulnar nerve, and my hand completely went dead. You get the tingles in your hand. And, you don't think too much about it. You think of it's an unfortunate knock. It's going to go away. The feeling's going to come back. I dribble up the floor. I get the ball off the floor. The ball's been swung, and my hands isn't feeling any better. I'm like, I can't feel my hand. I'm trying to squeeze it. I'm trying to touch it, and I'm like, the ball's coming back to me. This ball's been swung back to me. I don't know what to do. Like I only got one hand. So I get open and I grab the ball. And I tell the referee, we call a timeout, and that was the end of my tournament. That was the end of my,
That was it.
I'm sitting at the end of the bench, man, and McKillop's looking down at me like you're ready to go, and I'm like, no, I still don't feel it. You're waiting there for 5 minutes and nothing there. So then we go back to the doctor, sees it, and he says my nerves are ripped apart. My nerves are torn. So I was done. I was done for the rest of the year. I had to wear a half cast for like 4 months, and ended up in a blessing in disguise because with the ulnar nerve, the nerve has to grow from the back of the neck all the way back down to the point. So it grows like a millimeter a day. So and if you don't immobilize it, it could tear it apart again. So you have to keep our arms in one, keep it stationary and then let it grow. And then, but like I said, it ended up being a blessing in disguise because I was operating on 2 bad knees. I had tendonitis in both knees. I had 2 bad ankles. I mean, my body was broke after 4 years of practicing and playing. And then, but luckily for me, after those 4 years, I never injured again. I never wore ankle braces, never had knee problems. My body just rested, recovered, and
okay. So it gave you that couple of months just to recover, and that's crazy that took that toll on you over the 4 years. But I guess twice a day.
Yeah. We ended up playing Ohio State in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
That's right. I saw that.
Lost by 4, I think. But we had a chance. We had a legitimate chance to win. And the next round, we could have got on. We could have had our own little Cinderella story. We were good enough, but we had the talent to do it. And we were experienced seniors. We had a lot of seniors who were really, really good. So, like I said, when you get a little bit older, the game gets a little bit slower. It's a little bit easier to win.
To win, yeah, that's true. That's really cool. So you have like a Southern, is it Southern Conference you guys were in then? It wasn't the Atlantic 10 that they're in.
No,
now.
we were Southern Conference. Yeah.
Southern Conference. So they've moved now, I think.
After Stephen Curry, the game, obviously publicity got a little bit better, looking for a better market. The Southern Conference decreased drastically. The teams really dropped out. College of Charleston were really good. Appalachian State were good. There was a lot of good teams when we were there. We were very strong. But eventually a couple of them just kind of went their own way, and the conference got weaker and weaker, and Davidson were just dominating it from year to year. And so they felt they needed a better challenge, and Atlantic 10 provided that, and they're there now, and they're doing pretty well there too.
And did they just apply? You can just apply if you're winning it enough. You can.
Yeah, you can make the application. You can decide to get accepted by the other schools and join the conferences.
Okay.
Has to be accepted, but the whole school has to join it. So you have to, obviously, the football team, everyone, tennis, all got to join the same conference.
Oh, right. So it's a kind of a director of sport decision.
Exactly.
Everything's moving. We're going to go up a level in everything and invest more in it. Okay, interesting. So that's, I suppose that's your. There's probably a lot more there to talk about, by the way. But so after that, at that point, I suppose Did you have any kind of aspirations in your mind then to kind of go back and look at playing professional? Was there other guys on the team talking about that kind of thing, or was there?
Yeah, I mean, the goal was always to play professional.
Okay.
To keep going, to go as far as we can for as long as we can. Earn as much money, save as much money as we can, doing what we love, and then obviously plan for the future. So that was unfortunate for me. Those 4 months were during the summer months, so when people were being recruited to teams, I couldn't have been picked up because I wasn't available to be picked up. So when I actually came out of the cast and was healthy enough to get back into training, it was closer to the start of the season. I hadn't picked up a contract, but then I was lucky enough to pick up a contract in France in Pro B. A point guard got injured and needed to replace him for 3 months, and so I did that. And had a really good time. Team was, I think when I left the team, we were we're second or third in the league, and doing really, really well. Enjoyed playing, and the French league was, talk about physical, talk about athleticism and physicality. I mean, leagues are so different in how they're allowed to play and the type of athlete that's in the league. But in France, I mean, you could forearm guys, you could sit on them on their hip, you could literally anchor them to the ground. So if you had strength, you had a big advantage in terms of controlling people defensively. But it was fun. It was a great experience. And then they offered me to stay, but the coach had an affinity for the point guard who they got injured.
Was he a local? Was he actually from?
He was a local guy, but he was a guy who the coach kind of came up with. He was kind of like an Iverson type. He was a guy who dominated the ball, who wanted to score, who was flashy but ineffective essentially. But he looked the part. But if you're talking about efficiency and team, he was terrible. The team ended up losing like 12 straight after we left. They were battling relegation after being second or third. So he was obviously the wrong part for the team.
For the team. Sometimes they do favor local guys because from what I've seen, the fans love to see, like the local fans who come to the games, which is important in those clubs because they sustain the clubs.
Well, interestingly enough, that wasn't the case because
the fans, they didn't like him at all.
No, the fans were cheering my name. So
they should have kept you on. It was a silly decision.
they tried to, but I didn't. I didn't get the feeling that the coach was going to give me a fair chance.
Okay.
So I went to Spain. I went to Spain instead. So I moved from there to the second highest, not the ACB, but the league below the ACB. Leb Gold or Leb whatever, Leb 1, Leb 2, whatever it was called. They've changed the name so many times. I don't know. And then when I played the playoffs there, that league was fun. I mean, talk about a different type of game. It was creative. It was fast flowing. You couldn't touch people on the perimeter. I mean, there's a reason why the Spanish guys move so well and play so free is because you can't touch them on it.
Oh, really? So it's kind of just the level of physicality on the perimeter is totally different.
Yeah, they have freedom of movement on the perimeter, and it suited me because I was a slender guy, so I was able to move free. You couldn't put your hands on me. I could get into the gaps I wanted to get into. So, but in the paint, it was very physical. So for me, that was the ideal league for me in terms of playing, and the one I really enjoyed, and it was good fun. It was a lot of fun in Spain.
Just thinking in France, the structure, like in terms of how many Americans they can play, because different leagues have different Americans. In France, is it like 2 Americans or is it like 3 or 4?
Two Americans. So we had 2 really good Americans. I don't know if you remember him. His name was Harold Arsenal. He played for Weber State. He had a run in the NCAA tournament for Weber State, who they brought them on the national attention.
I remember Weber State, but to be honest, there was points at which I didn't watch college basketball. I'll be quite honest with you.
But he was a name. He was a name. He was, people knew about this guy, and he was with us. And we had a guy from Bahamas who was also an excellent American. We were good. We had a lot of talent, and we had some really good local guys, older guys who could play the game, and then some young athletic guys who played different roles. But it was 2 Americans and then a couple of extra Bosman, I suppose you call them.
Bosmans, okay. And then Spain was similar? Was it like
same thing, yeah.
Similar situation. So yeah, a couple of Bosmans, 2 Americans, 2 or 3 Americans. You get sometimes the Americans with the European passport as well. I don't know if you saw that much.
Yeah.
So you'd have an extra 2 Americans on the team that were Division 1 that had a granny who was from Italy or from wherever.
Or Ireland.
or Ireland, yeah. That's true. Yeah, you can get those 2. Okay, cool. So then, what was next after that? Then there was a couple of places on the list that I found, but there was some gaps. Just like I couldn't find everything. So there was definitely. It said at some point you went to Germany, and that was one of the leagues that I played.
Right after that, I went to Germany for 2 years. Rashier Farm Ulm, who are now the middle of the table, the top league in Germany.
So their first league, okay.
Yeah, they had aspirations of moving up. So at the time, there was 2 different leagues, North and South, and basically there was no playoffs, so you had to win your league if you wanted to go up. So you had to play your league out, and whoever came out top, obviously got the opportunity to move up to the top league. So Rashier Farm Ulm had a 5-year plan of moving up to the top league. So they were one of maybe 4 clubs who had the ambitions of actually trying to advance to the next league, who had the funds, who had the players to do it. And so our coach was Mike Taylor. He's the head coach of Poland now, and he's in Germany, back in Germany with Hamburg again. But he was brought in at the same time, and we were good. We were a German top league team playing in the 2nd division, trying to move up. The unfortunate thing about it was we lost. We won 95% of our games, but the games we lost to the same team in double overtime by a point both times, and that team ended up moving up.
So they're pretty good. They're a pretty strong team as well, obviously.
Well, like I said, there was 4 teams who were really good.
Okay.
They could compete with every other Bundesliga team, no problem.
Right.
It's just they were in the situation they were in, and because there was no playoffs or anything, you had to win those games in the league. And they were great games, but to lose both games in double overtime by a point.
Actually, you could have quite easily moved up to that top league.
Yeah. I mean, they eventually did.
They eventually did, yeah.
They did it in the 5th year, and then they never looked back. They've gone on to do bigger and better things. They built a new stadium. Ulm is a big basketball town now with great structure, great youth structure, and it's the same people who were involved who had the vision of trying to build a Bundesliga team.
Okay, right. Yeah, I almost looked those guys up. The team that I played for ended up going to the first league as well, so they're actually in the first league as well, at Kreilsheim. Yeah. He's, and they're this tiny town in the south of Germany.
Yeah.
And this guy,
it's compact and it's crazy. And they had when I was there, they had this like superstar local guy who was just mental, and he took
a player.
Like he was an idol in that town, and he was good, but he had a license to do whatever he wanted. It was amazing to see. But I don't know what happened to him. I forget his name, but he was good. But they were fantastic games. The crowd was mental.
That's the one thing I was surprised about with Germany. I don't know. Maybe I had these silly stereotypes in my head that they wouldn't be as passionate as maybe, I don't know, Greek league or something. But they love it.
They're invested. They're invested in the club.
Yeah, they absolutely loved it. The guy who ran the club is just a legend, because he started the club in like 5th league, like below the regional league, with his mates, and he slowly became, I guess, the owner, and they're still on the board, and they've just moved up all the leagues. And like, we were walking around the town, like everybody in the town helps the club. It's incredible.
They're invested. They're really invested in
like, and he goes around and like, remember we needed towels, and he drives into this like warehouse, and he comes out with like a load of towels. And I was like, did you just take them straight off the belt, or what's going on there? So it's very much community driven, which is incredible. Not maybe different for the bigger teams, but certainly for these smaller teams.
Yeah, they have to do what they have to do. Make it work. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. And so the top league in Germany, then, I think it's a kind of a strange one. They're allowed like 6 or 7 Americans. I think it's unlimited.
They changed their perspective on it, and it's worked out for them. They opened up the league to not only 6, I think it was even more. 7 you want, but you had to have a number of German players on the floor at one time. So it was 1 or 2. So they reduced the pool of qualified German players, and because you reduced the pool, you made those players a little bit better, because they were competing against better players all the time. You made the league way more entertaining. You market and speed, undersized guys flying up and down the court, athleticism. And then those German guys had to kind of adapt to the type of game, and then help those guys improve, which in turn helped the national team improve, because those guys were competing against better players, more athletic players on a consistent basis. It also helped the lower leagues get better, because the pool of players that were, the guys who were left out had to go somewhere. They just filtered down into the lower levels. And you're like, but it's not fair. Sweden has a similar issue at the moment. They're trying to decide. Sweden's gone the opposite way now. They've it's like
reduce the amount of Americans,
reduce the amount of foreigners to try and increase the opportunity for Swedish players. But they don't understand that the quality of Swedish players isn't very good. So the game isn't going to be better because of it. It's just going to be a sloppier version of the previous game. This is it. This is the unfortunate thing. When you're looking at the pool of players available, you're better off going the other way and having a tougher test for a fewer amount of Swedes who are good enough to play at that level, and then advertising the league, selling the league as entertainment, selling the product. Germany.
That's interesting. Yeah, and the German First League has, so I went to watch one of I went over to Germany for the Christmas markets, I think, and I went back to the club and visited them, and they gave me tickets to the First League game. And they had a bunch of lads that played in the NBA Summer League. They had, the level was really high, and they now play in this dome, this massive dome with 20,000 people. They've upgraded, and it is a product, like he said. It's a better product.
And I guarantee you see posters all over town of these Americans up on. They're advertising these people, these players, as people to kind of follow, get to know. They're selling these guys as someone to get attached to. The marketing's brilliant, and people love the game. It's on TV. They're making a lot of money. The German national team has improved. The game is definitely improved in Germany. I don't know why more countries haven't looked at that model and said, what did it do? Why did it work? And then how do we kind of pluck things on that to make it work for us? Because there's no development going on in the league teams. There's none. There's not enough resources. There's not enough time on the floor. So even if you're letting a young player play, that player is not going to increase his ceiling by playing there. Yeah, he get maybe a little bit more experience, but his actual skill set or opportunity won't be much more than sitting at the end of the bench twiddling his thumbs. And maybe he's practicing, and in this practicing, like they're scripting tactically about how to win the game. So there's little to no development going on in these clubs at the highest level. So open up the door for them to play. They're not going to get that. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work because the foundation behind it is wrong. And
that's interesting. Yeah, because I've not heard the counter argument, but I guess there's people looking at it like it's probably that it's something got to do with the grassroots. It's got to do with like they want more locals playing in the games. It's something like that, isn't it? That's the sentiment, isn't it?
But I mean, the reality is the locals aren't good enough to play in a high level. So people are going to come and watch a high level game, and all you need is one local to be attached to. You don't need 5 of them. You need one who's good and qualified. And then the overall goal is to produce 12 players who are good enough to play at the highest level in Europe for a senior men's team or women's team. In the same thing. So I get the argument, but if the resources aren't there is no argument. It's a sentimental way of looking at things, but it's not reality.
Yeah. So you could have a league that exists, and I guess it's the players that are then not able to make those teams, they would play in the league below, and they would. Yeah, and you could have a feeder, like a lot of those German teams have feeder teams, right?
Yeah, and they could be Kreilsheim, second division, where people are attached to the local players who are playing at a high level and still generating the interest, still feeling the buzz, and when that takes over and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you start adding a little bit more pieces, all of a sudden Kreilsheim in the top league, and you've established a connection with the club and players who've come in, and so.
It's interesting, and actually, we did see 2 younger players break into the top team, which was all professionals essentially. Yeah. From there, an under 16 kid actually ended up making the team that was on the German national team, and he'd come on for a couple of minutes and he could shoot, and he got some minutes and hit some shots.
But he could be himself. He could be himself. I think that's where people get it wrong. They don't let the kid be himself. So they don't let his game or her game translate on the floor. So they can't be who they are, the version of them who got them there. They have to be a different version. I know in Sweden it's been working like this thing. The game has been scripted so much that the kid has come in to play a role, to do a certain script to make things work for somebody else. Instead of letting the kid, maybe he has a flair for creativity or shooting. That's held back for the betterment of winning this tactical approach. Whereas the long-term benefit is letting this kid kind of grow and figure out who he is, and maybe his ceiling is way above the American you've actually brought in. But you don't get to see him that way because you don't see him in the same lights you see the American. Like we had kids. We have a local kid here who's going to Rutgers University.
Rutgers, yeah.
So big conference, big school. And the local team, the local professional team, which is one of the best, they recruited him to come to the team, and they said, they had a conversation of, like you say, you're one of 300 kids we're talking to right now for this opportunity. he started laughing to them. He said, "Okay, see you later." Like he hung up on them, but it was like, come on, they can't pay him. They expect him to believe that they're a high level of basketball, that somehow they're giving him something, which essentially they're not. And the Americans they bring in, they're not the caliber of Rutgers. They're not that level. So this kid is recruited by Rutgers, who are an extremely high level in the States, and they view him as a role player, local kid who could cheap labor, who can maybe come in and buy your time, instead of thinking of him like, hey, you got talent, kid. You just come in and play. Let's start you. Like we feel you're going to be the future of the club. This is not.
Yeah,
that's not even sort of thinking.
Well, it's interesting because the hopefully he doesn't see this, but the kid ended up staying in the club but not getting the minutes, and he's kind of faded off a little bit. But looking back, his development would have been much better had he done something like taking a scholarship or something like that.
I mean, you got to be careful with the scholarship too, because I'll be quite honest, they don't develop you individually in college. They do make you very, very sharp. They make you defensively really, really sound. the game slows down because you're playing at such a high intensity. So in terms of you reading the game, feeling out the game, it makes the game a lot slower. But you get developed based on the system that you're in. So if you're lucky enough to have an open system, then you're going to develop more skills. If you're in a different type of system, then you're going to develop those skills to help the team win. They may or may not work for you as an individual. So it's very, very important that you suss out what type of system the team is playing, how the coach plays and how he rotates. Does that fit you as a player? Then you have to take the kind of onus on yourself is to get into the gym and work on the skills that you think you're going to need going forward, so you don't lose your identity as you go through 4 years of college, which a lot of kids end up doing. They become role players because they've accepted the role, they kind of settled into it, and they've forgotten kind of what made them good, how they developed their own game when they were younger, and how they just kind of the skills, they explored new skills, tried new skills, but in college they're kind of put in a role that fit to help the team win. And I think a lot of kids never took that opportunity that was available for them to kind of develop their own individual skills throughout the 4 years they were in college, myself included. And looking back, it was one of the biggest regrets that I didn't take. The facilities are fantastic, and I didn't use them as much as I should have, because again, there was no one ahead of me to tell me these things. There was no one, hey Michael, get into the gym and get the extra shots up, work on your dribble pull up, work on your shooting on the move coming off screens. No one was doing any of this.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned because I suppose you've kind of blazed the trail and you had to do it by yourself. But the guys I talk to now say they're all in WhatsApp groups with each other and they're all talking to each other, the guys that are over there.
Yeah, that's great.
So they're all going through the same thing. Yeah. And, one guy has a bad game and then there's 10 other guys in a WhatsApp group saying, I'm just assuming now, right? They have a support network there. Guys are going through the same stuff.
It's badly needed. Yeah, it's really, really needed. For these
really? People. Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
It's great to be able to bounce, get this team off and just bounce ideas off other people and get their experiences, because you need it. If you don't have it, especially if you're coming from an international perspective, you're traveling all the way over to a different country and you're leaving your family behind. And the people who really have your back are left thousands of miles away. And then you're going into a new environment. And like I said, when you sign that document, you have to adapt to them. They don't adapt to you. And you have to kind of figure out who you are within that environment and kind of grow and develop over the 4 years. It's not easy for people to figure out. And,
and I think, as the guys have all mentioned on the podcast here, your reputation basically is gone when you go over there, because you don't have a reputation as far as they're concerned.
That's how you should operate. That's like all kids should operate. You got to get rid of this parochial thinking and this bubbles people live in that people think they're good. People like small countries, Ireland, Sweden, they're small countries, but within those small countries you have little islands of situations where people think they know. People have a perspective, they have an opinion on the matter, they have no experience on the matter, they have opinions on it, and they're influencing the kids all around them, and they're putting these kids on pedestals. They're telling them they're good, telling them they're talented, but in actual fact, nobody knows if they are or not. You don't know how that kid's going to respond. But if that kid goes over with an ego, he's gonna come back.
He's potentially in trouble. Yeah,
he's big trouble. If he goes over as humble and hardworking and knows why he's good and knows what got him there, that kid has a chance to be really, really good, because he's going to go into that environment and he's going to attack. If he goes into the environment and assumes that people are going to look after him and pat him on the back and mollycoddle it, he's in trouble, because that's not going to happen. And the players he's playing with, they may be his teammates, but they're also competing for the same thing he or she wants. And you have to understand that. You have to establish a hierarchy in the team, and you got to fight for every minute and every opportunity. And they'll go with the next kid up. They'll go, whoever helps them win, they'll go with. And if you fall out of favor, and you're fall out of favor in your second year, that's two more years of, that's a dire situation for a lot of kids. I mean, your whole dream of playing is shut down. You're sitting at the end of the bench. You're a practice guy. Your confidence is getting worse and worse every day. And I've seen it happen to some of my friends, some of the ex-players I've been around. They just end up becoming shells of themselves in terms of players, because they didn't understand the market. They didn't understand the business of college sports and professional sports. The same thing. You have to know what you're doing and why you're good, and not what people tell you or giving you pats on your back.
That's interesting. And I suppose when you first go over there, nobody tells you any of this really, unless it's basically you learn for yourself as you go, and you might figure out too late that like it is cutthroat, and at an elite level, it doesn't take much for you to miss out on the next guy's in, or it can be like that.
I think that's what small countries don't understand, is that in their own they're somebody, but they're actually nobody. And if you operate from that premise that we are nobody, that we have to fight for everything, then you don't have these parochial mindsets around them, because people understand that we're part of the bigger picture, where we're not just about me and my bubble and have success and winning local leagues and winning a cup, or that nobody in the rest of the world knows about or cares about, but somehow the local people find it important. But it's irrelevant in the big picture for that kid. And if you're involved in youth sports, that should be your perspective. If you're a senior and you want to play and you're playing for social, fine. You win whatever cup you want to win. But as a youth player, what does it matter if a kid wins an under 16 Irish championship or under 18 Swedish championship? Who gives about this? It doesn't matter in the big picture. What matters is that kid develops the right skill set and then is given the right opportunity to kind of progress himself forward, or her, and who knows what happens to them. Maybe they come back, maybe they develop into future fabulous NBA players, WNBA players, high-level European players, EuroLeague players, and then the country benefits from it, because those kids come back, and if they feel appreciative of people who are around them, the clubs, the country, they're going to give back. They're going to bring back, and they're going to help other kids, and they're going to talk to other kids and share their own story with other people and say, hey, this is my experience. These are the pitfalls. These are the situations you have to kind of look out for. Be aware of this. And the game will evolve, because people will start seeing a higher level of performance, and then they'll start mimicking it, and then the process will change. But Sweden is I imagine it's just like Ireland. It's people can't get along. Everyone wants to have their opinion heard. Everyone wants to have their piece of the pie, and no one's willing to concede anything for anyone else. When in actual fact, they should be saying yes to everything. If you're motivated to work, if you're motivated, you have an idea, if you have and you're willing to put the time and effort in, that's going to give opportunity for kids. It should be, what can we do for you? How do we help you? It shouldn't be, no, it goes against what we're trying to do here. It should be, yeah, why not? Let's do it. It adds value to the youth development process. And kids need more practice. They need more hours. They need more opportunity. They don't need to be restricted. It doesn't have to follow a certain pattern. It doesn't have to be controlled by certain people. It just has to be an opportunity. And where that comes from, who cares? Just give the kid more and more time. And
that's interesting.
And I don't think you see it too often. It's very, very hard to find. But I've been lucky to operate outside of the bubble of clubs for the past 6 years. So I developed a different perspective on this, because I was involved in clubs for many years in Sweden, but now I'm operating outside of clubs. I'm just working strictly with development, and it's a blessing in disguise to not have to worry about all the crap that goes on within clubs and between clubs and around recruiting players, and the rhetoric that goes on between clubs and situations within the country. So it's funny.
The club you're in, it's not a club, so it's an academy. Is it an academy?
It's a high school that's backed by the sporting governing body of Sweden. It's called RF, and we're backed by the Swedish Basketball Federation. We're one of two schools. We're the last 3 years of high school. So we recruit kids. We offer 5 girls scholarships, 5 boys scholarships every year. Okay. So we have 15. We have 1 full team over 3 years in high school, and then our sole purpose is to kind of foster or help grow future international players for Sweden. So be a stepping stone for them. Obviously, they're not going to be senior men's or senior women's players after 3 years of high school, but we can put them on the right track, give them the right steps, help them along to kind of find a new opportunity after this, and kind of see where that takes it, because we won't know the results of our job for another 5-6 years after they graduate.
That's true. Yeah, you don't get to see the fruits until they go on. And you still don't know where they're going to end up, I suppose.
Exactly. It's so hard to predict. But it's been fun working in the situation, working with highly motivated kids.
And do you see the level as akin to Ireland? Like you see them in the international competitions. I've not been following the underage and stuff, but like, is it akin? Is it similar level, or they're slightly ahead in terms of? It's hard to say, maybe.
It's hard to say. I haven't been involved in Irish basketball that much over the last couple of years. I haven't followed it as much as I used to do. But I mean, youth players are youth players, so of course it's a similar level. It's all depends on how the youth players see the level they're playing at. So what I mean by that is when we started off, um, my vision or our vision was to get to Europe, to play only international games, to play all the best teams around Europe, to find all the best academies and go up against them and test yourselves and kind of grow that way. And we didn't have any contacts in terms of that, finding that early on. So we used the contacts we had to kind of go visit countries and get friendly games and play. So I don't know if you know Nina Trinidge. I was emailing Nina. I know Nina pretty well, but he's from Serbia, and I was like, Nina, can you arrange games for us? We have a girls and a boys team. We want to travel over to Serbia. We'll pay for everything. We just want to get over and get some opportunity. And so we started doing this, and we started going to Greece, we started going to Italy, we started going to, finding people where we could go play, and all friendly games. And eventually we started to win these games. So we started losing pretty bad. So we went to Serbia, lost every game the first time we went over there, returned the next year with a little bit more perspective on the type of game, how the speed of the game, the type of game. Played teams, won half our games over there. The third time we went over there, we won 75% of our games. So same thing applied to every other country we went to. I mean, we were playing teams who were in the Adidas Next Generation tournament and beating them. Even though we weren't playing in any of these tournaments, we were good enough to beat them. Olympia Ljubljana, we bet. This year we've been lucky to play in numerous. All we do is play as tournaments now. We finally got to a level where now we're just invited to all around the world. We go to
Wow.
We go to the States, we go to Spain, Italy, or wherever. We've been invited to many tournaments where we're playing top class teams under 19, so the highest level in Europe we're playing. We're not in the Adidas Next Generation tournament, which is we're trying to get in, but that's an invitational tournament, and it's U18. It's very hard to get in. You have to have a player, you have to have a connection, which we don't have at the moment.
Right. Okay. So Okay. So that would probably be the one you'd be like. We'd like to get to that. Yeah.
That's like a EuroLeague
benchmark.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, that's the best of the best in terms of you can imagine the highest quality talent in Europe playing there. But we still play those teams. So teams that are in that, we still play them and we still beat them. So we're obviously good enough to be in those tournaments. We just can't get into them because we don't have the right type of connections. But maybe that will change over time. But I mean, this year we played Valencia, who are maybe a top 2-3 team in Spain. We beat the German champions. We played the Czech champions. We played some top-level prep schools in the States. The first year we lost every game we went to the States. The second year we won 2 out of 3 games. So again, we're playing the same teams. You beat the same team that beat us by 25 last year. We came back and beat them by 20. So it's only
there's some progress.
But it's only through exposure. So what I meant circling back to what I talked about, it's how the player view the competition. So a lot of times these kids don't know they're good until they're actually tested. And from a Swedish perspective and maybe from an Irish perspective too, is they put people on pedestals. They put other countries on pedestals. They put other nations. They hear all these things about these other nations, these other coaches that they're doing this, doing that, and they kind of run away with their heads. So that it's just youth basketball, and youth basketball can be good. A player can be good in any country. A top level player can come from any country. It's about what the kid does with his time or her time in that country and what's available. So it's a matter of thinking like that and not kind of shooting yourself in the foot before you even step on the floor. I mean, from my youth experience with the Swedish national team, my first experience, I'll give you in general. These kids, the first game was terrible for them. So we end up playing Spain or we end up playing Ukraine or something like that, some name, and they're just like shell-shocked. And it doesn't matter about the preparation. It doesn't matter about if we're peaking at the right time. But all that matters is that when they step on the floor, when the jersey, with the national anthems, they just freeze. And they're waiting to see what happens. They're waiting to see if they are good enough instead of saying, hey, watch this. I am good enough. I'm going for it. You react to me, not me react to you. And there's very few kids with this mindset in the sport, especially from the Swedish perspective. And when you come across, it's like a breath of fresh air. But that's how the kids should think. It said, why not? Why not? Why not me? Why not? Why can't I perform? Why can't I play? Why am I waiting to see if someone's going to give me an opportunity or someone's going to let me be who I want to be? And
it's definitely a mindset and kind of having the ability to kind of not play. They call it playing scared, where you you come into a place and it's overwhelming, and you're looking at the other team, and there's a reputation that comes with that, and then it's kind of in your head then at that point, right? I suppose you're kind of.
I've seen it change, but I've seen it change, and that's what I'm saying. This is what I'm talking about. It can change if the kids get exposure to a higher level, if they actually get tested and learn from it. But if you don't ever get tested, and this is a predominant way of thinking, that grows, that gets bigger, that gets stronger. That type of mindset gets stronger. It's harder to break later on, and you have to get these kids playing higher level international competition just to expose them to it and say, why not? Look at this. They're just Spanish kids, are just Spanish kids. You had to have more Spanish kids and maybe they have a higher level, but the average kid is just an average kid. And it's about the pool of players and the amount of available players. And the difference is, yes, they have a culture of basketball. So they enjoy it more. They talk about it more. Okay, right. Whatever. The game still has to be played.
And especially at an underage, the gap isn't as you say, the gap.
No, it's not. There's no gap. It's yeah, maybe you have a bigger pool of players who have a higher level of competence at a younger age, but they're still as kids. They're still the 16-year-old undeveloped, longer, slower. Guards are guards. If you can shoot the ball, you can still shoot the ball. It doesn't make a difference. Like youth basketball is just youth basketball. You can be good from any country, and if you start thinking like this, then you can go places. You can be someone. Yeah.
The one of the things is there's a massive travel requirement there. I'm just thinking out loud here. There's a massive travel requirement. You must have to travel to all these countries, and you get like a certain amount of funding needs to go into that to go to these tournaments, play against these teams, these top level teams, and really you can kind of like, let's say for example, take Ireland, and you wanted to do that over here with an academy or something like that. You'd need a certain amount of backing in terms of funding and financial kind of.
And we're lucky we do have it. Our school is funded by the community. So the community funded this program and they put in a budget for us. So we have about $100,000 budget for both teams, 50,000 for boys, 50,000 for girls. And we're lucky also to be beside an international airport. So if we can organize it, we can buy cheap flights. And I mean, I'll give you an example. We can fly to Italy cheaper than we can travel by a big bus to Stockholm and back in the same day. So it costs us about maybe €2,000 to get a 50-seater bus to drive to Stockholm to play a game, maybe 2 games in a weekend. And we can fly to Italy, we fly to Milan for €1,000 for 15 players and 2 coaches if we're scheduled. So these trips aren't that expensive if they're well organized and you have
on the head. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And you're right. I've often said, I said that too. Funny enough, when I said that to Barclays, I said if I work remotely, I can get back here cheap quicker than you can get a bus to Manchester because the flights are so cheap and so quick. So that's a fair argument. I've used that one myself. It's true actually. So actually, yeah, maybe there's less of a point to that actually, and cheap accommodation, you can probably pick that up as well.
And if you get invited to tournaments, they end up giving you better expenses, so cheaper with food. So they look after everything, but at a cheaper cost. So you end up playing maybe €30 a day for somebody for accommodation and food and good board because they want you to be there.
It's an invitational, so they kind of fund or cover some of the expenses, kind of thing. Exactly. So that's very interesting. It's an interesting perspective, actually. I never really looked at it like that either. Because you feel like it's out of reach or something, or it's just not attainable, or you know what I mean, right?
But I mean, we were so close this year because only for Corona we would have tried to pull out of Sweden completely. We would just played international games. We had 6-7 national tournaments lined up where we would train, and the reason we're doing it is not just for the games, but also for how we train. We found over 6 years of studying what we're doing that these kids, when they train in blocks of 3 or 4 weeks, their peak performance just goes through the roof. But if they're peaking from week to week, they don't perform there as well because you can't train as hard, or you can't train specific things. But if you can get a 3-week period or a 4-week period of training, and then have a cluster of games, it's like this, like the
interesting.
The players are really, really good. So we were trying to create that type of scenario to kind of keep developing and keep improving the players and kind of keep having them peaking at the right time.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I never thought about that. Yeah, I suppose if you just have one game at the end of a week, you can only get 2 sessions in. You got to rest the body and then play at the end of the week.
You can't train. You can train so much differently. Conditioning, lifting. You can train so much harder if you have weeks to prepare, and obviously you reap the benefits of those training at the end of it if you plan it correctly.
Yeah, and you have then multiple games then to go in and test yourself and come out of that better having played the games.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Anyway, I could probably talk more about your academy, but we might do it for a second run at it. I've got a couple of questions, and for some reason, I don't even know if you're watching this program, but normally I ask questions about like who's your favorite player or something like that. But Magic Johnson. Okay, that makes sense because you're a point guard. It was Magic Johnson, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, Magic Johnson. It's for me. He sparked my interest in the sport. He's so creative, so fast, so. I mean, it's just fun to watch him play. He for me, I think I was an open court player too. I think I chose to be an open court player because Magic Johnson was an open court player. So he was flowing, weaving, moving in and out of people, making quick passes, setting people up.
Made his teammates better, and you were very good at that. I can vouch for that. So I was going to actually ask something related to MJ, actually, and it was on The Last Dance. Have you been watching The Last Dance?
Yes, I've watched them all.
You have? Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Have you watched the latest episodes?
I have, yes.
There's a couple of bits, and I just thought you might have an interesting perspective on it. You might not. There's a bit where Scottie Pippen is sulking because Kukoc took the last shot of the game. Yeah. Right, and I remember, I'm sure at some point playing basketball, I felt like that, but never like sat on the bench.
Yeah.
Do you think it was a pretty terrible thing? I mean, it's a pretty obvious answer, but like, it's a pretty terrible thing to have left his team in the lurch like that, even though he wasn't.
I think he regretted it, even though he said he would do the same thing again. I think he's trying to save his own face a little bit for himself. But if you listen to what other people said about his character, they knew it wasn't him. They knew it wasn't who he was, and they love him, and they still love him to this day. So it was just an out of character moment for him, where he was built up frustration, and with all the way he's been treated and the money issues he was dealing with, and he's probably worn down from all those years of having to win and the pressure that comes with it.
I guess that was the 1 year Jordan was away. He wanted to be the man.
He was supposed to be,
and then he couldn't be the man. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Okay, I've got another moment here. I don't know why I just picked three. It just was so interesting the last 2 episodes. I was just I had to talk about them, and I thought Michael will have some interesting things. So Jordan in episode 7, he ends up they talked to him about how he maybe treated his teammates, right? And obviously he was just competitive almost to a fault. You know, a lot of any professional sports athletes, they're generally like that. They're just driven and competitive. And he was almost in tears at the end when he talked about the fact that his players had maybe said some things, and then I interpreted that as him having some remorse for the way he acted. But then I heard the director talk in a separate video that I came across randomly on Twitter, saying that he was actually just defending. He was trying to. He got emotional because he was defending the way he was as a basketball player and as a teammate. And I wasn't sure then which. Yeah. What did you think it was?
If you look at it, I mean, when I first saw it, I thought he was just being human. I think he was able to separate the competitive side, the on-court side, to the off-court side. And if you listen to behind the scenes or between the lines when people talk, like Michael appeared to be a normal guy or a fun guy to be around off the floor, but on the floor he was a different type of person. And I think as a person who separated himself from the game for so long now, that he is more of a human perspective to look at situations that maybe looking back and now hearing all this talk about how they saw him, how they feared him, and how he treated them, that maybe he had some regrets, some normal regrets any human person would have. Because he had some distance between the actual playing and
because he's so much more removed from it. He doesn't have that.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's almost like, oh, maybe I was a bit over the top.
And now he has 2 new kids. You know, he has a different perspective on the world, I imagine, because he's not in that environment. He doesn't have to be that guy anymore. He can be a normal human being. has empathy for other people. And now hearing this, you're like, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, and actually, when I saw him the way he was, I mean, on the court, and you see some of the clips of him in that episode where he's kind of almost taunting his teammates and being like
normal, but that was quite normal for the time.
Possibly.
People talking the way they pushed him, the way they challenged him. It wasn't about picking everyone up. It was about who could you go to war with. That was the message we were getting in college too. Who can you go to war with? So you'd be tested every day to see if you would snap. If you snapped, you were left behind. If you didn't snap, you were given the license. Oh, we can go to war with this kid. We can trust this kid. We can. This was the mentality. This was the whole thing back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and then it kind of changed over time. But
and that's what they talk about. The older guys in the NBA, they talk about, oh, they were shaking hands now. We didn't shake hands, and Garnett would say, like, we hated those guys. And
you walked off the court like you did exactly. That was the mindset. It was me versus you and us versus them.
Just a different approach, different mentality, right? It's tougher. It's much tougher. Actually,
much harder to hold on to. It's much harder to be that way than it is the other way, because you have to actually have animosity toward people. You have to kind of muster up like a rivalry. You have to go after people. You have to want to fight people, and that's not so normal these days.
No, it's not. No. And people they almost don't appreciate it. It's not even an accepted way to be.
Exactly.
Okay, I got one more for you from seeing as you seem to be into The Last Dance. The Jordan punching Kerr.
Yeah.
So I almost had like, is it understandable that he did it? I know I've seen something like this at a high level.
Yeah,
I've seen some pretty. All right, okay. Did you get punched or did you punch?
No, we punched, but we punched. Balls. We
Where was that?
Oh, college and as a pro in college. I mean, I remember things get so heated that we go after each other, and it was like I said, it was normal. It was normal behavior to do this, and normal accepted behavior. It was seen as it was a good thing. It was a healthy thing to be going. I just find it funny the whole scene. Like Kerr went off and hit him in the chest, and Jordan hit him in the eye. I can see how Kerr was kind of holding back, maybe because he's such a good guy. Jordan's just like
just hits him in the eye. Like, it's not really like equivalent at all. Like it seems really when you hear it, you're like, I don't think that was fair. Plus, Jordan said he went to the. Did he say he went to the shower? And he said, I just hit the smallest guy in the gym. He's obviously a lot bigger than him as well. You know?
This is how he saw him. It's just, but also the perspective of Steve Kerr, how he saw Jordan. He wanted to stand up to him, but he spoke to him in a different way. Jordan, he hit him in the chest, like hey, back off.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But that's interesting. You said that you've seen guys do it. I definitely saw guys do it. In fact, I'm sure one time, me and a guy
in the Sligo All Stars when I was growing up. I mean, there was fights every maybe month or so. There'd be some sort of scuffle where people would come to punches.
That's what I was pretty sure. Like I was like, this used to happen a lot, but it just doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't. Like it's gone out of the game.
I mean, the federations got it out of the game. NBA got it out of the game, so people didn't see it. Mm-hmm. It became something that people were frowned upon, and so people goes a different path. So. Yeah, and I think they kind of lead the way in terms of like even being able to talk to the refs now or say something to the refs, or there's no tolerance for talking to the refs now, and that kind of I felt like that came from the NBA, and it's kind of everywhere now, right? Well, you don't hear them talking to the refs, but there's talking to the refs going on. It's just you're not hearing any of it. You just say it this way instead of saying it directly to the microphones are picking it up, but you're not hearing it, and there's a lot of stuff being said to the referees that is still going on to this day. That dissent and that that going up to the refs in there. Yeah, that stuff. But it's still there. It's still there at a certain level. It depends who you are. It depends, on what level of competition it is too. So the higher level of competition, the more is allowed. The lower level, obviously, the referees will take. They take less, right? Yeah, that's true actually. Okay, something else. That's kind of that was the end of the three questions.
Yeah, look, Michael, look, definitely I want to come back onto this again because just so much to talk about. I'd love to hear more about your academy and stuff. Thanks for coming on. Absolutely brilliant. And there's probably more stories there, I'm sure, about your days playing and stuff.
Yeah.
Any plans to come back and visit Ireland, or do you come back at all?
Well, when COVID-19 settles down, our plan is to get back as quick as we can. You know, we planned on going over this summer, you know, spending time in Ireland, but our plans were shut down like everyone else's. So fingers crossed things ease up on the next 6 months or so, and then maybe Christmas time we'll be back in Ireland and spending time with some family. But we'll see.
Cool. Okay, and you'll be back to Sligo, do you think?
Yeah, probably. Sure. Yeah, that's the base. Always will be.
Okay. All right. Well, look, thanks a million again for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Cheers. Thanks.
All right. All the best. Bye-bye.
Cheers.